So, how many people have seen that video before? Only a few people. Well, the question when we think about the AI hype is that our future? 20 years from now, that we'll have to make those types of decisions. So, for this discussion, we'll focus on specifically 3 books by well-known artificial intelligence prognosticators. First, we have and he was here last year, the futurist Ray Kurzweil. His latest book is The Singularity is Near, When We Merge with AI. He predicts that a neural net with sufficient processing power will exceed all capabilities by 2029. That's 5 years from now. He also predicts that by the early 2030s, humans themselves, by connecting computers to the neocortex, will have access to superintelligence through connections to the cloud. As we gain mastery over biology itself, we will defeat aging through AI-controlled nanobots that will be able to conduct cellular-level maintenance and repair of our bodies. In the second book, Deep Utopia, Life and Meaning in a Solved World, S-O-L-V-E-D. Philosopher and former Oxford University researcher Nick Bostrom envisions a world in the not-so-distant future, presuming things go well, where we will be replaced by AI and will need to find other things to do to find some purpose or meaning. Thus, utopia itself becomes a problem because after we've solved all the other world's problems, the question becomes, what are humans to do when they no longer find purpose and meaning in work and serving others once machines are providing all those functions? In the third book, Kai-Fu Lee, former president of Google China and a senior executive at Microsoft, SGI, and Apple, along with science fiction author of Chen Cho-fan, offer a look 20 years from 2021 when they wrote the book in AI 2041, 10 Visions of Our Future. They provide an optimistic view of the potential of AI to sweep the world and create immense change in what would revolutionize employment and quality of life for millions of people. They see AI as taking over routine tasks, liberating humans to do more stimulating or challenging jobs. Humans will work symbiotically with AI, while we humans contribute creativity, critical thinking, and passion. Human productivity, in their view, will simply be amplified by AI, relative to what Bostrom and Kurzweil believe. They say we moved into sort of this new age from AI 1.0 to 2.0. And they see it as a culmination of decades of research and development finally coming to fruition in an amazing, exciting, and for many, scary. It's scary. Now, to be fair to Kurzweil and Bostrom, they do acknowledge that there will be scientific, ethical, social, and political challenges with AI. But I think Lee and Cho-fan better address these. Just a couple weeks ago, how many of you guys read Wall Street Journal, Andy Kessler? Love his articles, read them every week. So he noted in that recent article a couple weeks ago that AI will always need humans because it is ultimately human activity that drives AI. He maintains that it's unrealistic to expect the AI transformation will be some sort of straight line up, along the lines of, say, of Moore's Law. So what should be clear is that, history tells us when humans are involved, reality rarely sort of lives up to the hype. So let's now see what our panel thinks. So we first have Bob Marks. Thanks, Bob, for coming on up. Bob Marks is a distinguished professor at Baylor University and is a director of Discovery's Walter Bradley Center for Natural and Artificial Intelligence. He has published hundreds of peer-reviewed papers in the areas of algorithms and AI. And he actually says some of them are good, right? Some of them, right, Bob? He's the author of Non-Computable You, What You Do Artificial Intelligence Never Will. More recently, with Angus Minogue and Brian Krause, he co-edited the book Mining the Brain that presents new evidence that the human mind is more than just the human brain. Mathematician and philosopher Bill Dembski is the author, editor of more than 25 books, as well as the writer of peer-reviewed articles spanning mathematics, engineering, biology, philosophy, and theology. With doctorates in mathematics, University of Chicago, and philosophy, University of Illinois at Chicago, Bill is an active researcher in the field of intelligent design. He's also a tech entrepreneur who builds educational software and websites, exploring how education can help to advance human freedom with the aid of technology. And last but not least, we have, and who needs no introduction, is George Gilder. And by the way, George wrote a book, I think it was back in 2020, Gaming AI, Why AI Can't Think But Can Transform Jobs, which is available where fine books are sold. Okay, so I know we've had a little background on AI, but I want to just dig maybe a little bit deeper with our panelists. So Bob, question for you in layman's terms, please.
Layman's.
How long has AI been around, and why are these new innovations in GPT or generative pre-trained transformers, why is that so important to AI?
The term AI was actually coined at a 1956 conference in Dartmouth. This was attended by some great researchers, John McCarthy, who coined the term artificial intelligence. Also, there was Marvin Minsky, who was, he started the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, and Claude Shannon, who is the father of information theory. They all attended, and they thought that they could solve this problem in a few months. Well, here it is a number of years later, and they still haven't solved the problem. If you've used, by the way, the AI tool Claude, that's named after Claude Shannon. So that's
What's that if you...
Claude. Claude is like GPT, except...
Oh, Claude.
Claude, yeah. Not clawing, but Claude. Okay, so anyway, that's where it started. And we've had hype since then of the sort we say. I got to say something about that. Is that okay? Absolutely. I want you to know that Kurzweil wrote 20 years ago, The Singularity is Near. It didn't happen in 20 years, so he just wrote another book called The Singularity is Nearer. It's true. And I think in 20 years, he's saying singularity is right around the corner. I don't believe the singularity as he defined it will ever be achieved. You will notice that all of these people assume that we are computers made out of meat. And this assumption is something I certainly disagree with it. We have a spiritual side, we have an emotional side, we have aspects that are non-algorithmic, things that cannot be encoded, and I hope we could get a chance to get into that. But please recognize the underlying assumption of a lot of these things, which is we are a computer made out of meat. I don't believe we are.
And we'll definitely get into that, Bob. So. Bill, and thank you. Bill, as our mathematician, what is significant about GPT and how they compare to the human brain? Can you just explain what is artificial general intelligence, AGI, and why Lee notes that you don't even need AGI to make colossal impacts on the global economy?
Right. Well, I mean, AGI, that is, the computer can do everything we can do and better. I mean, so that's the aspiration that it's going to put it all together. Now, I think what artificial intelligence without the G, it's doing amazing things. It's solving problems. I'm a pure mathematician, so I'm not a computer scientist. I think the last thing I've coded was in Lisp and Fortran, so that's, if anybody knows, that's a long time ago. But, it's, I think with the large language models, that's the most impressive stuff I've seen, and yet it has some real deficiencies. I think this came up in the last conversation, where it was interesting. It was put in terms of that these systems can't reason, and that's because there's a breakdown in cause and effect. It's really not cause and effect. It's a question. Reasoning is fundamentally about antecedents and consequences. It's the logic that takes you there. Now, you can have causality, and reason can take that. But I mean, just to make the distinction clear, it's a point that C.S. Lewis made actually years ago. Grandfather is sick because he ate some lobster with salmonella. Now that's a cause and effect relationship. But grandfather is sick because he's still up in his room and he's an inveterate riser, and he would, if he wasn't sick, he'd be here. Now that's an antecedent consequent. That's reason. And what was tripping up this large language model was not cause and effect. It was this irrelevant information about 5 Kiwis being short and then the system just going haywire on it. So I think we need to be careful about what's actually amiss in these systems, and I think that's the problem. It can't really reason. It's just doing this sort of find the next token that's most likely, do a sampler. I liked what Lloyd Watts said about just really breaking it down. But that's that's the sort of limitation it deals with. And by putting in enough information, by having enough deep learning, it's producing some really impressive results. I mean, I would say,
Can it do math?
I'm sorry?
Can it do math?
Not well, not well. And I've also asked it, I thought, maybe it can solve some open mathematical problem like the Goldbach conjecture or a Riemann hypothesis. So I'd asked it to prove that for me, and it's bowed out on that. So, but anyway, so it's got these limitations, but still it's incredibly impressive. I mean, there were these Winograd schemas when I'd been following this for years and years, where it's getting the antecedent right. So the police stopped the protesters from protesting because they threatened violence, because they needed to keep the peace. The grammar is parallel, but the they is depending entirely on the semantics, and it's solving these Winograd schemas. And I've thrown it not just with one antecedent, but with 2, 3, and 4, and it's getting it. So it's doing some really amazing stuff, but it's still limited, and it has these weaknesses. I mean, and then just on the point of creativity, I had it. One of my favorite short stories is The Dead in James Joyce's Dubliners. And, I asked it, I gave it the last 5 paragraphs, and I said, please rewrite this in the style of James Joyce, and went ahead and just ruined it, And then I said, by the way, I mean, is James Joyce's Dubliners in the Dead in your memory repository? Yeah, it is. So why did you try doing this? And then it admitted finally that it had done a botch of it. But it's, you can just fool the system. And often I find it's like you can it's like an attorney leading the witness, and you can just get it into this sort of morass where it just confuses itself.
Thanks, Bill.
Which is why Musk and Dojo, most of the computations is for what he calls context, having to solve a specific problem of autonomy in automobiles. He's forced to massively increase the context of the issue. And I think this illustrates the fundamental flaw of this essentially serial intelligence that renders it artificial.
Yeah, I mean, if you narrow the context enough, I mean, it's these artificial intelligence systems are doing great when you narrow the context, and then it can just have at it and solve the problems. But it's when you start increasing it and then adding irrelevant elements. And I think that, this used to be, the big problem was called the frame problem. I mean, what's within the frame, what's out, and how does the system know what information is relevant and what isn't? And that seems to still be a fundamental problem.
So, Bob, we talked earlier today, and you talked about Band-Aids in terms of how they make these algorithms better. Can you tell us a little bit more about your Band-Aid theory?
Sure. I wrote a paper with a student that showed, and this is obvious if you think about it, if the complexity of a system increases linearly, the ways it can react increases exponentially. So therefore, if you have a complex system, you really have a lot of ways that it can respond. ChatGPT and the large language models have billions of parameters that it can tune. It's incredibly complex.
Trillions, yeah.
Trillions,
well, okay, maybe trillions.
They're up to 1 trillion.
I haven't kept up, obviously. But yeah, all of these things, and that means it's incredibly complex. That's the reason you see all of these hallucinations. I hate the word hallucinations because it anthropomorphizes the neural network and kind of assumes it's human, and I don't like that. So it makes mistakes because it was trained that way. That's exactly the reason it responds that way. So indeed, what has happened if you followed ChatGPT and some of these large language models, that there's a bunch of ways that it can go wrong. And what they've done is they place Band-Aids on these ways of doing things over the last year in order to address this. And you're the guinea pig. You're the one that finds out what is wrong with the ChatGPT, what is wrong with the response, and if you respond or it gets into some sort of media, that people go and look at it. One of the latest ones I saw, and you should try this with ChatGPT, the GPT-O, is to say, draw a picture of Times Squares, and there's no elephants in the picture. You cannot tell ChatGPT what not to do, because it got Times Square, and yep, there's elephants there. So do I think that that's something they can put a Band-Aid on? Yeah, absolutely. But right now, that's another flaw, and we're going to find flaws for a long time because of the complexity. That's the reason I don't trust ChatGPT, but I think I would feel safe writing in a self-driving car over a certain domain because it's simple. Yeah. The AI is simple.
Okay, so George.
And the context is definable.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So George, so in some ways, transformer models mimic the human brain, and you wrote your book on it. So will we be able to call AI at some point in the future intelligent with the ability to reason, plan, and create? And do you think it'll ever actually mimic the human brain through advances in deep learning?
It'll mimic. That's what it's doing. That's what it's doing now. It's mimicking. But information is defined by surprise. It's unexpected bits. And a system that's based on probabilities excludes the unexpected bits. That's all the information. And learning is increasing information. And wealth is knowledge, and AI is fundamentally and intrinsically barred from that kind of thought. The unexpected bits is how we learn, and AI is almost prohibited from learning. Because it's a probability system, which simulates creativity by a random number generator. And if you think that creative activity is analogous to a random number generator, can believe that AI can actually think, but it doesn't think. It just calculates probabilities on the basis of the data that it happens to have accumulated, and it really is shuffling labels essentially.
Bob, did you want to?
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about creativity.
Which doesn't mean it can't be useful and create jobs and do all the things that Andrew Mayne
We'll get to that next. Yeah, we'll get to that next.
Yeah, I was actually in court a couple of weeks ago.
You were what?
In court.
Yeah.
Indicted but not convicted. But no, it was for a divorce.
Seems to be going around these days.
It is. So, yeah, it is. Okay, no politics here. So the court reporter told me they use a large language model in doing the transcript because they do voice recognition and there's ambiguity sometimes. Like you say, I went to the zoo to see Gladly the cross-eyed bear. Okay, now, Gladly the cross-eyed bear is also a Christian hymn. Gladly the cross-eyed bear. Okay, so therefore the large language model can look at that, and because it sees zoo, this is what Bill was talking about, it puts it in context and say, yeah, this was a bear that was cross-eyed. So it was able to put it in context. But I wanted to address really quickly creativity. We talk about creativity, consciousness, and all of these other things without really defining them. Let me give you a definition of creativity. Creativity will happen in computers when the computer program does something beyond the intent or explanation of the programmer. Creativity will happen if the computer program does something beyond the intent or the explanation of the programmer. And I would, this is a longer conversation, but I would say that no, that hasn't happened yet.
But Bob, but from the human perspective, would a human perceive that it did that? That's the question.
This is very good. Blake Lemoine was here a couple of years ago. He was the engineer that was fired from Google.
Google, yeah.
Who is this?
Blake Lemoine. He was fired from Google.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because he said there was something. Yeah, and I asked him, we did a podcast together, and I asked him, how do you know it was sentient? And his response was, I know sentience when I see it. That was the same thing we saw in this Picard Star Trek episode. I know intelligence when I see it. But this is something like the Great Wizard of Oz. You need to look behind the curtain. You need to open the hood. You need to see what happens underneath. And what happens underneath is simply algorithms, step-by-step procedures to do things. We are beyond the ability, we do things which are non-algorithmic, which can't be computed. And so therefore, just judging sentience and sentience of the sort we saw here and Blake Lemoine did, no, you got to look under the hood, look behind the curtain, whatever metaphor you want to put in there.
So that's why you should get Bob's book, Non-Computable You. There you go. All right. So I want to get into something that's more practical to us all here, right? Purpose and meaning. So one thing in common in all three books, as is expected, is that as AI 2.0 superintelligence displaces workers, there will be a loss of purpose, for those affected, bringing about enormous ethical and societal implications. Now, while Lee argues this could exacerbate inequality, Bostrom argues that as labor becomes obsolete, causing what he notes Bill Gates has coined the purpose problem, with the right economic policies, we would enter an age of abundance, with general prosperity and material plenty for all. In the place of work, a leisure culture would rise up and allow people to thrive in unemployment. Unemployed people could pursue hobbies, spirituality, the arts, literature, sports, nature, etc. Kurzweil believes the GDP will actually grow exponentially due to AI-driven advances, and thus the social safety net will be able to provide a comfortable living for everyone through a universal basic income, a UBI, right? Funded by automation-driven profits sometime in the early 2000s in developed countries and soon to come to third world countries. So George, the Discovery Institute sees human technological innovation as bringing about an age of superabundance. What role do you see AI playing in that vision, and how does it compare to the competing visions of Lee versus Bostrom and Kurzweil? Do you see a future of UBI workers replaced or displaced by AI?
No, I think that Andrew Main's speech is correct, that people don't get hired because of their lacks. They get hired because of what they can do, and AI will amplify the skills of workers and create more work. This whole illusion that somehow people are hired because they lack capabilities is totally uneconomic.
I think, Andy Wang, who was running for president once, and I think also Mark Zuckerberg said that we eventually will be, basically people will be UBI. Everyone will be on UBI, right?
What will be what?
Everyone will be on UBI, Universal Basic Income, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's just stupid. I mean, it's dehumanizing the world. I mean, this is really reflects these delusional computer scientists, in my view, who've have no sense of the meaning of human life or its spiritual dimensions or our creativity in the image of our Creator, or any of the things that make our lives meaningful and valuable. I think AI, by eliminating non-human jobs, will release humans to new creativity and new accomplishment and to better jobs, which has been the experience of all.
Okay. Well, we'll tackle the ship of Theseus a little bit later. So, Bob, do you think it's realistic that we'll get to the point where the tasks and challenges that have given structure, purpose, and meaning to human lives for millennia will somehow be supplanted by AI?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think that in the past we have been. Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah. Do you think it's realistic that we'll get to the point where the tasks and challenges that give us structure, purpose, and meaning to human lives for millennia now will somehow be supplanted by AI?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think that today we are enamored by GPT more than any other AI because it's come into our living rooms and we can use it. Not many people know, for example, every time you use your credit card, your credit score is checked by AI. founded by Heck Nielsen Corporation, who sold, I believe, to Fair Isaac for $93 million or something like that. And so the forecast of your power consumption is generated by AI. But these are all behind the scenes. We have now GPT, which is in our living room, which we can use. And I think that in the past, we have just been enamored. I don't know about you, but George predicted the coming of the cell phone. And when the cell phone first came, I went, wow, I'm old enough to remember when we had landlines, and the cell phone just blew me away. A GPS system, wow, this is really incredible. And so we have these new technologies come around, and there's kind of a peak of hype, which was addressed in the hype curve, which was shown earlier, and there's a peak of hype, and everybody gets excited about it. But I maintain that probably in 10 or 15 years, that all of this large language model stuff will be something which is incorporated into our society, which will make our lives better. Technology historically has made our lives better, right? We're not out hoeing our fields. We have tractors to do that now. And we can all be here listening to great speakers.
So, Bob, we talked earlier about diminishing returns, and Andy Kessler had mentioned that in his article a couple of weeks ago. What is your thought? Is that what you're saying, is that you think there'll be diminishing returns?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the history of AI, and I believe I mentioned this last year, but it turns out there are algorithmic advances made by human beings. AI doesn't write better AI. You had the error-back propagation. You had in 2017, Ian Goodfellow came along with GAN, which is the foundation for deep fakes. And then 2017, information is all you need for the transformers. And all of these were quantum steps which were generated by human ingenuity. And each one of these has come out, and then everybody does an application. And that's what we've seen here. A lot of people are applying these basic algorithms. Even Sam Altman, the president of AI, said, I think probably in an unguarded moment, that in order to go forward with this, we need a new algorithm. And so we're waiting for the next big algorithm on the form of a GAN or a chat GPT or a transformer model in order to get to the next level. But right now it's all incremental, and I've seen this in the history of artificial intelligence.
Okay, thanks. Bob. Bill, so now Bostrom notes at the heart of the argument around purpose lies a pessimistic view of human nature, that basically we're unfit to inhabit a perfect world. How would you describe human nature in view of the potential of AI in Bostrom's position?
Well, let me frame that question. Milton Friedman, years back, he was, I think, treated to, kind of a Potemkin village in Russia, where he saw, full employment, and he had these workers who were working with pickaxes and shovels. And his point, what he responded was when they said, isn't it amazing that we've got this full employment? He says, well, if you want to really get even fuller employment, just give them spoons instead of shovels, So it's not just work, it's meaningful work, it's achievement. I think that's going to be crucial, and can that be maintained? And I'm a Christian, so when I read Genesis, I find that there's work in the garden before the fall. So work is something fundamental. I work with some Clemson University personality theorists. We've been developing a personality inventory. And, it's clear, social relationships and work, those are the two key factors of human happiness. So a world of leisure, spirituality, arts, no adversity, no challenges, type of Robert Nozick experience machine in his book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia. It's interesting, that was the 1974 utopia, and that's the sort of, the grim utopia that Bostrom is talking about. So these themes have been around, and, so we need meaningful work. And, and I believe we will always have that. I loved Andrew Main's, his approach to it, and I think there's always going to be that. But I think we have to also have a perspective that it's not going to get to the point of everything that the AIs can do, they can do better than us. It seems to me that there is always going to be a fundamental gap, that we will be the only artificial general intelligence. Now, I come at that, I think partly for metaphysical reasons. I think the whole issue of consciousness, for instance, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit later, But so there's this problem of with work. How do we keep finding the meaningful work in a way that where we just give me a moment. Let me collect my thought. But it seems to me what we're doing with artificial intelligence these days is it's more of a bottom-up sort of approach. We solve problem after problem after problem. If you read Kurzweil, his approach is more top-down. We're going to simulate and just simulate everything away. And this takes me back to, actually, it was in 1998 at a Telecosm conference where I was introduced to Kurzweil. You were the one who organized that. And Kurzweil, he was talking the same sort of game about simulation. And I remember there was a fellow named Michael Denton who was there, and he says, we can't even simulate a neuron. I mean, you think about a single neuron. You know, you've got the body, you've got dendrites. An average neuron in the brain is going to have 1,000 to 10,000 connections where, you know, you've got the dendrites, the axon, the cell body, the axon terminal, the boutons that connect then with other dendrites. You've got at least eight different neurotransmitters, you know, dopamine, serotonin, you know, you got the endorphins, you know, some are excitatory, some are inhibitory. Modeling all that, these are chaotic systems, you know, and I think Kurzweil would have to say, well, we're just going to go after the functional part of it, and we can simplify that. But where's the evidence of that? You know, that all of that sort of complexity with all those neurotransmitters is dispensable, that we can just substitute some zeros and ones or maybe some vector with some weights in it, and that's going to capture the neuron. We have absolutely no evidence for that, and that is then going to allow us to bootstrap that sort of simulation to get then a purely artificial computational system that will match up with all of human capability. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence for it. You know, if we're not able even to model a single neuron, you know, and I come at this, you know, I did a PhD with Leo Kadanoff at a time when chaos, nonlinear dynamics was the rage back in 1988. You know, you know, I think he has to put his head in the sand and say, you know, and basically hope against hope that all this complexity that we find at the level of single neurons is not going to undercut his attempt to do a computational reduction. And he's got no evidence of that.
So I think because he has a reductionist perspective, that's why he views it in that manner.
But it's more than that, because he talks about several possible reductionist perspectives. I mean, there's this high-level functional where it seems that we can just capture what's going on at the neuronal level very simply. But then he'll talk about a molecular level and even a quantum level. He talks
at the nano level. Yeah.
Yeah.
He believes
so it's you know, and so basically he's got to hope that things are not happening at a quantum level that are going to be crucial to our intelligence.
Penrose, of course, thinks that consciousness is only explicable at the quantum level, and
right. And at that level of complexity, you know, you've got an informationally porous world. I mean, you know, there can be all sorts of other causal influences. I mean, if you're metaphysically inclined toward a soul or spirit, there's no problem with an interaction there that's not going to violate any sort of physical law.
Okay, so we're going to jump into that. So our next topic is merging with AI. Did you want to go, George?
No, I was just thinking of maybe questions from at some point.
Yeah, we'll hopefully in the next 15 minutes we'll have time for a question or two. So in the future, Bostrom envisions that most minds will be digital, which may be AI or uploaded human minds, which will have greater computational power, will live longer, and they'll be faster thinking. Thus, humans uploaded to digital minds will be able to operate at much higher levels and demand higher levels of income. Kurzweil envisions a human future in the 2040s that he calls a singularity, when nanotechnology will expand our brains with virtual neurons in the cloud, merging us with AI and expanding our intelligence and consciousness through millions of times the computational power biology gave us. So, Bob, what Bostrom and Kurzweil predict, it sounds like pretty good stuff. So what problems do you imagine as we merge with AI, if we merge AI with human brains through the brain-computer interfaces that they predict sometime in the 2030s or 2040s? And will computing power actually accelerate exponentially, as Kurzweil argues, along the lines of Moore's law?
You know, I don't know. I just know now I can only think one thought at a time. I don't know what happens if I get a neural implant and they try to put 50 ideas in my brain. I don't know if I could handle it that. But even more seriously, in the 1990s, there was something called the Brain Project. And the Brain Project was going to try to map the human brain to a digital equivalent. It was a total failure. There are aspects of us, our spiritual assets, our creativity, our understanding, our idea of even love and compassion, which are not algorithmic. They cannot be explained by an algorithm, by a computer program. If you tried to upload yourself into a computer, you would miss these non-algorithmic processes, and I think you would be a very, very boring person with just the algorithmic aspects of it. So no, I don't think that is going to happen. Notice, again, computers made out of meat. If you're a materialist, you got to believe that. You got to believe we're materialists made out of meat. But nevertheless, just like people of faith look at immortality, this is their answer to immortality. So it turns out in a lot of religions, there's kind of parallels to this sort of thing. There is, by the way, an AI church. If you go to AI church, you can actually look at it. It's in California. It's for real, and really, really interesting. You know what their scripture is written by? ChatGPT. Yeah.
What was written?
Oh, their scriptures are written by
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
They admit it on the website. It's written by ChatGPT. So.
It looks like we have a question by our illustrious guest and speaker, I guess, during this conference, Jim Tour. Hey, Jim.
Hi. So you know, I've long thought, because I've been a professor for 35 years, and I teach the same way that Aristotle taught. There's in a toga, right? there's
that long ago, Jim.
Students in a room, and I'm lecturing, and they're taking notes, and it's all the same. And I've often wondered, why can't we just have them come in, pay $100,000, and boom, there's a download, wireless download, and they go off, and that's it. So, you know, this is always what I've wondered, when will we be able to do that? But my question is really to Bill. You said something very quickly, and it piqued my interest, that you said that if you get to the quantum mechanical level, then this idea of the spiritual becomes a lot more accessible. And I'm not disagreeing. I just find that interesting, because there are phenomena at that level that are really quite interesting, where an electron can be in multiple places at any one time. It's just more here than there, and could you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with this in a book that I titled Being as Communion, Metaphysics of Information, but the idea is a lot of, I think, these days in quantum mechanics, a lot seems to go deterministic in terms of a multi-world, multi-universe, so that you run the Schrodinger equation and it's conceived as deterministic. But you know, in terms of your actual experimental practice, you're always using probabilities. So it seems that there are irreducibly probabilistic things happening at the quantum level. So is there some sort of causality behind that? You know, some people would say, well, there's no causality. It's just, you know, it's just that it's following probability distributions. But it seems to me that is a point of nexus where a spiritual reality can, if you will, collapse the wave functions in certain ways. This is a very unpopular view among materialists, obviously. But it seems that quantum mechanics allows for an informationally porous universe in a way that a deterministic world, purely deterministic world, wouldn't. You know, so it's, you know, God or human spirit or whatnot can interact at that level. So for me, a model of the mind is much more that of the mind is a typewriter and there's a typist, or it's a radio and there's a signal that's coming in. The radio doesn't account for the symphony that you're hearing. There's an information source that's interacting there. And so likewise, the brain then is this kind of receiver for a for the mind, you know. And this is even from a biblical perspective, the body is a garment. The soul is something that's much more fundamental, So that's the sort of picture that I go with. I find it compelling. I don't think the science can go either way, because in a sense it pushes it to a metaphysical level. But that's so that's a way I could see an interaction taking place. And it raises also interesting questions. You've got, there's a neuroscientist, John Lorber, and I remember reading this in Science back in the early 1980s, where he would look at hydrocephalics, and whereas our cortex is usually a few centimeters thick, he had one student, 126 IQ, top math students, with a cortex of just 1 or 2 millimeters. So virtually no brain, and that was, I think, the title of the article. Somebody who's intelligent with no brain. So how is it that you can have that level of intelligence? And I remember talking to people, and they said, well, there's just tremendous redundancy in the brain. Well, if you've got that sort of redundancy, then give us much smaller heads, and then we can pass through the birth canal much more easily, and we're not going to kill. From a natural selection point of view, if you can get all that intelligence for a lot less brain, then do it. So that was, so you've got these anomalies which suggest that, Louis Pasteur had a cerebral accident, a stroke, and when his brain was examined after his death, half of his brain was atrophied. So how do you account for something like that? So it seems that it's very convenient from a materialistic perspective to push the computationalism, push for some sort of neuroscientific reductionism. But it seems that there's evidence that would at least open this possibility of a porous universe, a mind that is tied to the body. It's, I'm not sure I'd go with a substance dualism, certainly in a Cartesian sense, but that there's a reality that you simply cannot reduce, and obviously when we read
I'm a hylomorphic dualist.
Okay,
so,
so
I go with the Aristotelian perspective. But anyway, Bill, because I have a couple more questions for you guys, and we have some people in the audience, so just give us a couple more questions, and then we'll take your audience questions. So George, and then I want to get the ship of Theseus, and have each of you maybe want to say something about that. You talked about how creativity is the effect of minds in the image of the creator. This is intrinsic to the nature of being a human. Kurzweil proposes that eventually exact copies of the human brain can be created segment by segment, the little neurons of each, and so, which means that this computerized replica of your brain will be you too, since it will have all of your experiences and memories. Would you two actually be you?
No. And Amy Kurzweil, Ray's a good friend of mine, and his ideas can't be caricatured, really. I mean, his new book, The Singularity is Nearer, is the best explanation of artificial intelligence I've seen, and it actually allows you to dismiss it in its grander claims. And his daughter is very amusing about all these issues. And Amy Kurzweil is his daughter, and she's going to be appearing tomorrow. And she'll give you a fascinating insight into the Kurzweil family and their debates on this subject, and the subject of reviving Ray's father and all obstacles it incurred. I mean, it's Ray got the singularity, and he that was his flag, and he raised it. But it's a mistake to reduce his views to that cartoon.
So Kurt, so this is for the three of you, and we have about 5 minutes before we're going to give you guys, we'll give you guys a chance. Okay, so Kurzweil relates the ancient Greek thought experiment called the ship of Theseus. It's a wooden ship's planks are slowly replaced one by one. What would happen if eventually all the planks were replaced until none of the original planks were there? Is it still the same ship? And what if you were to store the old planks in a warehouse and rebuild the ship from all the original planks? Is it the one that continuously existed with only incremental changes? that is the ship of Theseus, or it's the one that was reformed from the original parts, which was the ship of Theseus. So Kurzweil is thinking that, well, it's similar to that, in that if you were to change everything neuronally, right, if you were to substitute those, you would get the same thing.
Yeah. Well, he thinks we can live forever, possibly, and through this process, which changes the nature of the human being and the dimensions of the human being. I mean, death is an essential part of life, and as we experience it, and it actually lends resonance and significance to our activities. So I think we're not the ship of Theseus.
We're not the ship of Theseus. Bob.
Yeah. When you die, you're alive, and then you're dead.
Right.
And there's this quick transition. And what's the difference between being alive and dead? You're chemically the same. All of your neurons are the same. All of your cells are the same. I don't know. Something happens there. I will say that, the Planck thing, this is a philosophical question.
It's a philosophical question,
But
yes.
in reality, there's this myth, we talked about this a little bit, that every cell in your body is replaced every 7 years. Well, I looked up, and this is what I looked up on ChatGPT while we were talking. So this is the greatest authority. So it actually says that most neurons in the cerebral cortex, the part involved in higher cognitive functions like thinking and memory, are not replaced after birth. So those neurons that you get during birth are not replaced like the rest of your body. And the other place I heard, the other cells that never die and never replaced, fat cells.
Oh,
So that's a bummer. Okay.
that's a terrible thing.
Yeah,
So Bill,
it's terrible.
Bill, just a couple minutes, and then we'll go to our questions.
Right. So I think the real issue here is multiple realizability. So it's interesting. I mean, there's an implicit assumption there with these planks that they're interchangeable, so that you can realize the same ship with a different set of planks. But what happens when you go to the neuronal level, for instance, or where you have quantum effects, where there's, by manipulating, as you do in a double slit experiment, you actually change the way the whole system works. So this sort of Planck analogy doesn't seem to me to hold at the neuronal level, where the rubber is going to meet the road, where you're going to have to actually do the simulation. So I think he misses the point there. And I think another thing, actually, just to bring into this discussion is the notion of transposition. It's something that C.S. Lewis pointed to. But you can take the same chess algorithm and run it on a much faster machine, and it's going to be much stronger than on a. It's the same idea, but it's implemented in different ways. And the Christian view of resurrection is that we're going to be, we're going to have a new set of planks, but it's also going to be in a new environment with a new physics, or ultra physics or something. So it's, it's not going to be subject to the same constraints that we are now. I would be frankly worried if I were Kurzweil, to upload myself in a digital system where you could have a meteor shower, an EMP or something, and you're gone.